It's happening. Or at least we hope it is. Out of fear of heartbreak, we're all trying to temper our expectations. But it's impossible not to get at least a little excited about the UFC's booking of Khabib versus Tony Ferguson for the fifth and hopefully final time. What we have in Khabib versus Tony is a clash of styles and a clash of personalities, but most importantly, it's the ultimate matchup of the best versus the best. Khabib is undefeated and has seldom looked vulnerable in his entire career. Tony, meanwhile, is on a 12-fight win streak and has a deserved reputation as one of the most violent fighters in the world. This will be the first time in UFC history that each fighter comes into the fight with win streaks this long. Khabib has demoralized and broken his opponents, while Tony has taken his to the depths of darkness, where he makes them bleed and overcomes them through sheer willpower. This is a matchup between the irresistible force and the immovable object. The lightweight division has been cleared out, arguably more than once. The winning streaks have been kept intact. Many consider this fight to be cursed, but in fact, if there ever was a fight of destiny, this is it. The injuries and botched weight cuts have only served to build up the fighters even more, and with them, the fight itself. If these two had fought at the finale of The Ultimate Fighter 22, I doubt it would have carried quite as much weight as it does today. But it's not enough to wax poetic about this fight. We need to get somewhat technical here. What will be the respective game plans? What will be the most likely outcomes? In what area of the fight can each man seek out an advantage against the other? And this is why we need to first talk about Tony Ferguson. Because as much as Tony is respected among fighters and fans alike for his entertaining style and unparalleled heart, he is the unquestioned underdog in this fight, and this is not without reason. Both fighters are on win streaks, but one of them has done so at far greater cost to his own health than the other. You may have heard that Tony Ferguson has made his last 7 opponents bleed. This is true. This is something that happened. We have documentation of it having happened. But he himself has taken quite a beating as well. In fact, through the course of his impressive win streak, Tony's been badly hurt in a number of fights, and if not that, has absorbed a substantial volume of strikes in most of them. Tony fights as if long-term health is a funny joke. He just does not give a crap. Many have observed this and noted that Tony cannot be broken. Even if Khabib takes him down and punishes him, Tony will not be out of the fight until he's truly out of it. In fact, if you can condense all the common arguments that are made in favor of Tony beating Khabib, or at the least in favor of him being a major challenge for Khabib, it boils down to Tony's guard, Tony's heart and chin, and Tony's otherworldly conditioning. When it comes to Tony's guard, I've long expressed that I don't think that type of game works against Khabib. And in fact, we have historical precedent to suggest that it doesn't work against Khabib. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect Tony to dish out ground and pound from the bottom against Khabib like he did against Josh Thompson. As for his signature finishing move, the Darce choke, he doesn't get those from the bottom. He gets into position for the choke out of a scramble, and then is confident enough in the choke to give up the dominant position. As good as he is, I think it's safe to say that Tony will not Darce choke Khabib. Or let's put it this way, if he does, it would be one of the most shocking moments in the history of sport. Heart and chin, on the other hand, can absolutely play a factor, although I do think we have the tendency to play up the psychological factor more than is warranted. This is, after all, an athletic competition, however much psychology plays a role in it. Khabib didn't mentally break Al Iaquinta, for example. He simply outclassed him for 5 rounds. It didn't matter how tough Al was. Of course, Al is not Tony, so if Tony's able to go the distance, he surely will have a better chance at mounting some meaningful offense than Al ever did. But the truth is, nobody can do much on the ground against Khabib. He's too far ahead of his peers in that realm. Tony's path to victory is not in finding an opening for that Darce choke. It's in somehow keeping the fight on the feet long enough to do serious damage. And this is where his mental toughness can play a big role. After all, what if Khabib 10-8s him in the first round? What if Khabib rides him for 2 rounds? If there's anyone who wouldn't be shook by that, it's Tony Ferguson. Thus, in my analysis, Ferguson will have to make the most of a key opportunity, the break round. We've all seen it, Khabib takes breaks. This is not even a criticism, it's perfectly natural for him to take breaks. 5-round fights are a marathon, it's smart of him to pace himself. However, from Tony's perspective, this can be a huge opportunity. This is where Tony needs to pounce. Elbows, back fists, all the creative strikes that Tony loves, he needs to throw everything at Khabib in this window. Tony's been able to make guys bleed thanks to his effective use of elbows. If he can make Khabib bleed during Khabib's break time, that would be an interesting development. Tony's last fight against Donald Cerrone was won by doctor's stoppage. Khabib versus Tony will be in Brooklyn. We've all seen how the New York State Athletic Commission reacts to cuts. This is of course assuming the fight plays out that way, but there's another interesting factor at play. If Khabib has his way in the early going, will we even get to see Tony's world-class cardio on display? This is called a scarf hold. It's one of the most effective forms of side control in grappling, although not as common in MMA. It's of no direct relevance to Khabib versus Tony. I'm only bringing it up to illustrate a point. Observe these two variations of the same position. They look more or less the same, but there's actually a world of a difference between the two. In the one on the left, the guy on the bottom is simply being held down. He can't move his head and shoulders, which prevents him from bridging and shrimping out. But in the one on the right, his ribcage is being crushed and his lungs compressed. This subtle difference in leg positioning of the top guy is actually of great significance for the poor guy on the bottom. Anyone who played Street Fighter as a kid is familiar with the concept of a health meter. If we imagine that real fighters have health meters, Khabib's strategy is to drain his opponent's meter as soon as possible. The idea being that when the guy comes back up, he's not the same. Thus, when Khabib is holding someone down, it's not just that they're being held down, they're being crushed under an immense weight, in a way that is often imperceivable to the viewer. This could impact Tony's conditioning in ways we've never seen before. In conclusion, in order to win, I think Tony needs to pounce on Khabib and to stand up when/if Khabib takes a round off. This is assuming that Khabib does Khabib things early in the fight, and also that Tony has the conditioning to recover and be able to do Tony things even after that early onslaught. The beauty of MMA is, of course, that what we see could be completely different from many of the things I've mentioned. MMA has a tendency to make everyone look stupid from time to time.